Hey y'all, it's Stephen Van Kampen-Lewis, and today I want to do kind of a quick video about the Heart of Texas Orchid Society show that happened on March 1st and 2nd of this year, 2025. And it was a really good show. There was a lot of flowers. So I'm just going to do a quick walk around of the display tables. Overall, there was a lot more flowers than expected, and it's a small show, so I kind of want to give a little bit of love to some of these smaller shows that are outside California and Florida because they deserve attention as well. But we had four vendors actually, three orchid vendors. Timbuktu Orchids, which is from Kansas, and they brought a lot of really interesting stuff. I've never seen them before or worked with them, but the folks there were very knowledgeable, both judges, and had a lot of really cool miniature orchids, which is not something that we typically see here in Central and South Texas. So that was really cool to see. And then Spring Orchids from Houston always has cool stuff. And then Brandy Orchids was there as well. And then Carnivoro from Dripping Springs near Austin had a lot of carnivorous plants, as you can imagine. But in this video, I just go around the display table rather than focusing on the vendors. And I do a voiceover, and I'll go kind of quick since I know your time is precious. I try to keep my videos to around 10 minutes or so. But anyway, let's take a look at some flowers. There was some really cool judging that we got to do. We got to award two plants, a Phragmipedium and a Dendrobium, and I'll talk a little bit more about those in the video. So as you walk in the front, we have this display, and then to the left, you'll see the volunteers, and then, around the backside of that first display is where we really start seeing the blooms and the displays from the members, both in Austin and elsewhere. And we had some really cool, some really unusual plants that we don't typically see. We had a lot of these Ludicea in full bloom. Of course, most folks grow them for the leaves, but here they were blooming. And one of the vendors brought some really cool stuff, including these Draculas, which were pretty sad looking at that point in the day. They don't hold up well in warmer weather. And then we also had this really nice Bulbophyllum, which, as you can see, got a first place ribbon there from the ribbon judging. And then Timbuktu Orchids is one of the vendors, and they brought some really interesting small plants like these Scaphocepalum. There was a Muciferum, which is in the back. I don't zoom in on that one, unfortunately. But this Scaphocepalum, there's several species of Scaphocepalum, and as you can imagine, they're kind of hard to zoom in on with a video. So here are some close-ups. And then as we continue to go around the table, it was great to see other folks besides myself taking photos and videos, and I had to kind of dodge some folks as you can imagine. But here's this Maxillaria sanguinea, I believe. And it looked really cool. I think most folks grow the Maxillaria tenuifolia, which is kind of difficult to grow in cultivation, but the sanguinea is much easier. It doesn't grow up. It just sort of grows out in a normal fashion. Here's one of the Pescatoria hybrids, and there's this little Galleandra cross, which was cool to see blooming this time of year. Usually they bloom in fall. And some more unusual stuff. I don't really remember what those were. And then we get into the Dendrobium. And more specifically, we really saw some interesting Laturia Dendrobiums. This is not one of them. I don't remember what that one was, but this is one of these Laturias, and really interesting. Some hybrids and some species, and this one, of course, has more color than a lot of the ones. This is one that we actually awarded an AM, and it was a Roy Tokunaga with some really intense colors. I really like that one a lot. And what I mean by really intense colors is you see on these photos these really clean white petals and sepals with this really distinct dark striping on the side lobes there, and this sort of apple green in the center part of the flower. And the other awards have a lot of pink, and it's almost a muddy pink that's in the petals and sepals. And I think the pink detracts quite a bit from the quality of the flower, especially compared to these nice, clean, white ones. And then there was this cross here, and I don't recall what it was, but it was a big plant with big, really fuzzy flowers and cool blooms. It's the kind of one that if if I had room in my collection, I would have definitely bought because one of the vendors was selling them. And as we continue along, there's some more. There were some oncidiums. This is one that comes back every year, and it's just a monstrous plant. And we've already awarded it an AM and a cultural award in previous years. So as you can imagine, we did not award it again with an AOS uh, award, but we certainly gave it some ribbons. It got a bunch of ribbons. It may have gotten best in show. Yeah, I think it got best in show, best flower, and best grown. Again, I think it's won those awards in previous years also. And then as we continue down the line, there's some other interesting things. Some I want to say Miltonia, and I can't remember if it's Miltonia or Miltoniopsis. I'm blanking on that right now. And then some others. We got into the Phalaenopsis here. Some complex hybrids. Nothing unusual or particularly oddball, I guess. This was a cool one with where the lip imitates the petals and sepals. And then this was a Phalaenopsis and another plant actually growing on the same mount together, which is very unusual. You don't typically see that very often. It's not very successful typically. So to see these growing well together was unexpected and unusual. There was some more phals here, and we started to get into the species. I think this was Belina or maybe a Belina primary hybrid. Here's Schilleriana here, or a Schilleriana hybrid. This one was definitely a Schilleriana species. Real nice young plant there with a small spike for that species. And then we get into the Vanda types, and there's this Rhyncha stylus kind of growing in a jar, which is certainly an interesting way to do it. There's a kids table, as you can imagine. I'm not going to zoom in on them, but it's always nice to have at this particular event. There's always a kids table with drawing and orchid education. Actually, the materials for the orchid education is put out by the AOS. And we have some big bulldog paths here. I'm not a big slipper fan, so I don't really spend much time looking at these. Although there's this Saint Swithin that I kind of looked at a little more. That's always a great primary hybrid. I want to say it's Philippinense by Rothschildianum, and there's so many awards for that particular cross. And that was a young plant that we showed. And here's some other really nicely colored slippers or Paphiopedilums. Nice and dark. I really like those types. At least for slippers. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the slippers. Here's a nice pink one. I think it's a Malapoense cross primary hybrid. And there was this tiny little Philippinense. I don't know that I've ever seen a Philippinense flower that small and plant that small. So while it's not going to win awards, it is certainly one that people might like if they're space limited. So I wonder if that was intentionally grown that way or not. Here's a Phragmipedium that we ended up awarding an AOS award, and I wish my film here or my camera here could do it justice. And I'll show some photos in a sec, but here are some more Phragmipediums, some much smaller ones, and the smaller ones are kind of cool again for people that are space constrained. Here's a Phragmipedium piercii. This is a species and the plant is very grassy and grows in very wet conditions in South America. So small but really cool. Of course, here's a Schomburgkia hybrid of some sort, and then some of the complex Cattleyas. And of course, I'm not going to name each one of these. I'm not a huge fan of complex Cattleyas, to be honest, but there were some really nice colors in these ones, and this one really like popped out and stood out as one that was very colorful. Um, and as we sort of move this way, there are lots more colorful Cattleyas. We're getting smaller and redder. And as you can see, all of these plants are arranged not in a display, but by genera, actually, in class. And so this is what's called a bench show or a table show, where instead of having multiple different displays put up by various groups around, and everything's just on a single table, and again arranged by genera, and it makes setup really easy. I think a lot of folks say, hey, well, what about the displays that are grouped together? Won't the public notice? And they don't. The public doesn't know anything about orchids. Typically, they're just here for pretty flowers. So why not make our jobs easier as show setup, show hosts, and just arrange things by class and by genera. Oh, this was a really big Ludemaniana. Of course, as most of you know, I'm a huge species fan, Cattleya species fan, and this was ginormous. I think that was the clone Arthur Chadwick, which just has hand-sized flowers, and of course that lip steals the show for any Ludemaniana. And this was Rojo, the Cattleya Rojo. Really intense colors. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the complex hybrids, but this one just really explodes with color, and as you can see here, it's just intensely red and really stands out as a showstopper. Nodosa hybrids and Encyclia hybrid here. This was an interesting one with pretty big flowers and on a young plant. This was a really nice Nodosa cross, and I don't recall exactly what its name was, but and let me see if I can get the camera to focus. There we go. This was a little Encyclia species. Really teeny tiny little flowers. I bet it smells nice during the day. But I tried to get some photos, and my camera just wouldn't zoom in for photos. So the video was the best I could do, and actually didn't turn out that bad. And a few more Encyclias, and that's pretty much it. That was the display tables, and then the vendors were around the back side. Here's an Epidendrum ciliari. Let's see if we can zoom in there. And that one was really nicely fragrant at night when we were judging. And of course, here's some photos of judging, AOS judging. We got some students and associates there, and some associate judges there. This is one that Roy Tokunaga that we gave an AM, and here's the photography, of course, which this is Ron and taking photos of these plants, and it was a really great show. I had a lot of fun.